They didn't just call me a quitter. My own mother said I was the shame of our family. At my brother's celebration, she leaned in close to my aunt and whispered, "She has no value. All she ever does is give up." In that moment, it felt like every scar I carried from the army wasn't as deep as the wound her words cut into me. I left the service years ago, but that night in Texas, surrounded by laughter and raised glasses, I realized the battlefield I could never escape was my own family. The road stretched long and dusty beneath the Texas sun, every mile pulling me closer to the town I once called home. My name is Claire Donovan, 35 years old, a former Army officer who carried scars you couldn't see. Yet in this town, none of that mattered. To them, I wasn't a veteran. I wasn't someone who had served. I was just one word: quitter. When I walked through my mother's door, the scene was achingly familiar. She bustled around the kitchen, her voice high with pride as she praised my brother. Mark. Mark had done a short stint in the reserves, never saw combat, but in her eyes, he was the family's shining emblem of honor. I watched as she handed him my late father's silver watch, the one passed down through generations. She pressed it into his palm as if crowning him the heir to our family's legacy. I sat quietly at the edge of the room, the weight of that moment sinking into me like a stone. My chair felt smaller, as though I was just a shadow at my own family's table. No words of recognition came my way, no glance that said I belonged. Then I noticed the envelope lying on the counter. My name scrawled across it in my mother's neat handwriting. Inside was an invitation to a large family gathering at the town's only banquet hall. A celebration, she wrote, a night for the Donovans to come together. For a brief second, I thought about tearing it in half. I could stay away, spare myself the humiliation, but the thought hit me hard. If I didn't go, they would say I was hiding, proving them right all over again. So I slipped the envelope back onto the counter and said nothing. The air around me felt thick, oppressive, heavy with judgment I couldn't escape. The walls seemed to echo with unspoken accusations, and even the silence felt suffocating. The night ahead promised more than just food and laughter. It promised a storm, and I knew I was about to walk straight into the heart of it. The closer I drove toward the banquet hall, the heavier my chest felt. The glow of neon lights in the distance blurred into memories I couldn't push away. I hadn't left the army because I was weak. I had left because a training accident nearly shattered my spine. Staying on the front line would have meant risking a wheelchair before I turned 40. So I chose another way to serve, pouring myself into developing medical technology for veterans. One memory clung to me like a lifeline. The day a medic survived because of a field kit I had designed. Watching him breathe again, against all odds, filled me with pride. Yet my family never wanted to hear that part. To them, all they saw was that I had walked away. At the banquet, I sat quietly at the edge of the long table, the room humming with laughter and clinking glasses. I tried to steady myself, telling my heart to stay calm. Then it happened. A neighbor leaned forward, her voice carrying just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I heard she got kicked out because she couldn't even pass the fitness test. Such a disappointment." The words sliced clean through the noise. Heads turned toward me, as if waiting for confirmation. Mark's lips curled into a smug smile, the kind of look that said he had been waiting for this moment. Heat flooded my face. I clenched my jaw, biting back the urge to defend myself. Silence was my only shield, though it felt paper-thin. Plates of food arrived, steaming and fragrant, but I tasted nothing. Mark lifted his glass, his voice booming over the chatter. "At least our cousin who just enlisted knows what honor looks like, not like some people." Laughter rippled around the table, a low, cruel chorus. I dropped my gaze to the napkin in my lap, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then I heard it. The one voice I had prayed would never join the chorus. My mother's. She leaned close to my aunt, but her words cut through the air as sharp as any blade. "She has no value. All she ever does is give up." I froze. It felt like someone had slapped me, right there in front of everyone. I swallowed hard, the taste of metal on my tongue, and said nothing. The meal went on, laughter and conversation swirling as if nothing had happened. But inside me, a storm gathered strength. This wasn't just misunderstanding. This wasn't just gossip. It was my own blood dismissing my very existence, reducing my life to nothing more than the label they had nailed to my name. The room grew heavy, as if every breath inside it carried judgment. Eyes settled on me from every direction, waiting, hungry. Then a voice rose above the clatter of silverware. A local veteran, once close to my brother Mark, leaned back in his chair and said loud enough for all to hear, "I heard you didn't leave on your own. You got kicked out because you couldn't keep up. Isn't that right?" A ripple of whispers spread across the table. Heads nodded, lips curled, as if his words had sealed the truth. My chest tightened. This wasn't idle gossip anymore. This was a man in uniform once, someone they would all believe. I opened my mouth, ready to speak, but before a word left me, Ethan appeared, my ex. His arm was wrapped snugly around the waist of his new wife, his smile sharp as broken glass. He tilted his head, catching the light, and let the venom drip. "I remember when you swore you'd be a soldier for life. Guess your life turned out a little shorter than you thought." Laughter broke out in cruel bursts, glasses clinking in mock celebration. My skin burned hot, blood rushing to my face until I felt dizzy. I sat frozen, caught in the vice of humiliation. Inside, a war raged. If I speak, they'll call me defensive. If I stay silent, they'll think I admit it. No move seemed safe. I was trapped, pinned by their eyes, their smirks, their amusement at my expense. The master of ceremonies, Mark's longtime friend, grabbed the microphone with a grin that made my stomach turn. He raised his glass and boomed, "Let's have a round of applause for the only Donovan who knows how to quit halfway." Scattered claps rang out, followed by snickers that spread like fire. Each sound struck me like a slap. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was their entertainment, their jester on display. My chair scraped against the floor as I pushed it back. I stood, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But before I could take a step, a voice from the other end of the table cut through. "That girl will never be remembered for anything in the army. Not now. Not ever." The words lodged deep, sharp as a blade twisted slow. My throat tightened. Tears threatened to rise, but fury held them back. My fists curled at my sides, nails biting into my palms. They wanted a scene, wanted me to break so they could laugh harder. I drew a breath so deep it hurt, forcing my body still, willing myself not to give them the satisfaction. I turned, ready to walk away. What I didn't know was that this moment, my silence, their cruelty, was only the prelude. Something none of them expected was about to walk through those doors, and the storm I had braced for all night was finally about to break. I turned toward the door, my chest hollow, my legs heavy as if they carried chains. I just wanted out. My hand touched the handle when a sound split through the laughter, the low, grinding roar of an engine outside. The noise grew louder, closer, until the squeal of tires against gravel made the entire room fall silent. Forks paused mid-air, glasses lowered, heads craned toward the tall windows. Through the glass, headlights cut through a swirl of dust as a green military vehicle rolled into the parking lot. Its presence was jarring, almost surreal against the glow of chandeliers and the hum of party chatter. Whispers rippled through the room. The door of the vehicle swung open, and out stepped a man whose very stance carried authority. A general, dressed in full uniform, medals gleaming beneath the harsh floodlights outside. His face was stern, his eyes sharp as a blade honed by decades of command. The door to the hall opened, and the sound of his boots striking the polished floor echoed like thunderclaps. Step by step, the air thickened, conversations died in throats. The crowd shifted uneasily, stunned. "Why is a general here?" someone muttered, their voice trembling more than curious. I froze. My pulse hammered against my ribs, each beat louder than the last. My fingers slipped from the door handle. Whatever storm I had been bracing for had just taken a new, unimaginable shape. The general didn't hesitate. He didn't glance at Mark, or the master of ceremonies still clutching the microphone, or any of the curious faces craning to see. His stride was direct, unwavering, aimed only at me. He stopped before me, heels clicking together with crisp precision. His hand lifted in a salute, his eyes steady. Then he extended his palm to clasp mine firmly. His voice rang out clear enough to silence the last murmur in the room. "Captain, you never quit. You chose the harder road, and you saved more lives than anyone else in this hall." The words crashed into the silence like a hammer. Somewhere behind me, glass shattered against the floor, a wine glass slipping from a stunned hand. The room froze, suspended in disbelief. Mark tried to salvage the moment with a strained chuckle. "You must be mistaken, sir. She's just—" "I have never mistaken one of my own," the general cut in, his tone steel. His gaze swept the room as if daring anyone to argue. "Her medical training program kept 14 recruits alive during a field exercise that should have taken them from us. None of you here can claim such a thing." The silence deepened, heavier than before. Faces shifted, smirks melting into shock, derision folding into shame. Eyes that had mocked me now darted away, unable to hold mine. The microphone in the MC's hand crackled weakly, its feedback a hollow reminder of the cruelty that had filled the room moments before. Now, no one dared to speak. The air was thick with the weight of truth, undeniable and absolute. The general's words still echoed through the room when he reached for a glass of red wine. He swirled it once, the crimson liquid catching the chandelier's glow, then lifted it high for all to see. His voice, steady and commanding, filled every corner of the hall. "She never quit. She only changed her battlefield, from the trenches to the lab. And in doing so, she saved more lives than any of you could imagine. That is what honor looks like." The declaration struck harder than any insult ever could. The same room that had pulsed with laughter and mockery just minutes before now held its breath. Forks stilled midair, glasses rested untouched. Every pair of eyes turned toward me, no longer mocking but unsettled, confused, embarrassed, some even shamed by their own cruelty. From somewhere down the table, I heard a hushed voice tremble into the silence. My aunt, her hands clasped together as if in prayer, whispered, "Dear God, she really did that!" The sound of her words cracked something in the air. Faces softened, smirks dissolved, and a ripple of disbelief passed over the crowd. The ground beneath me felt unsteady, as if the whole world had shifted in the span of a heartbeat. Then came the moment I could never have imagined. The general turned to me once more, his glass still raised, his eyes held mine, unwavering, as if daring the room to defy him. "To Captain Donovan," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a command. The twist landed like lightning. Those who had sneered, who had smirked at my pain, now scrambled to follow suit. Glasses lifted hesitantly, awkwardly at first, then more firmly as the weight of the moment pressed down. The clinking of crystal echoed like an anthem. I stood there motionless, stunned, as the tide of the evening turned. Just minutes earlier, I had been the butt of every joke, the family's black mark. Now, by a single raised glass, I had become the center of honor. The same voices that had drowned me in ridicule were now silent, forced into reluctant respect. It was as if the room itself had spun on its axis. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible, I wasn't a disappointment, and I wasn't their scapegoat. I was seen, and this time, they couldn't look away. Mark's face flushed crimson, his forced laugh brittle as glass. "It's just a misunderstanding," he stammered, his words fumbling in the heavy silence. His eyes darted to the general, then away, searching for an escape that wasn't there. My mother's gaze fell to her lap, her hands twisting the napkin until it nearly tore. She couldn't look at me, not even for a second. Shame settled over her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. In the corner, Ethan shifted uneasily, his arm slipping from his wife's waist. The smug confidence he'd worn like armor all night had vanished. He tugged her toward the back of the hall, their steps small and quick, as if retreat could erase the cruelty of his words. I rose slowly, the chair legs scraping against the hardwood floor, a sound louder than any shout. My eyes swept the room, the family who had doubted me, the neighbors who had whispered, the friends who had laughed. I felt none of the trembling that had rattled me earlier, only a steady calm. "I don't need anyone to prove my worth for me," I said, my voice even, each word landing with the weight of truth. "I have always known who I am, and tonight, the truth has spoken for itself." A hush deepened. No one dared meet my eyes. It wasn't my anger that silenced them. It was the undeniable weight of what had just unfolded. They had seen the salute, heard the general's words, and no argument could erase it. The MC, once so eager to humiliate me, lowered the microphone to the table. It gave a small, pitiful crackle before falling quiet. His smirk had dissolved into something that looked an awful lot like regret. Around me, the room sagged under the burden of shame. Those who had clapped at my humiliation now avoided looking my way. Even Mark, who had always reveled in being the family's golden son, kept his gaze fixed on the floor, his jaw tight with defeat. The silence stretched on, heavier than the jeers that had filled the hall earlier. It was no longer the sound of cruelty, it was the sound of guilt, of people confronted with a truth they could not laugh away. I didn't need to say another word. My restraint was the sharpest blade I could wield. The general's presence had already carved through every lie, every cruel whisper, every mocking toast, and in their stillness, in their inability to meet my eyes, I saw it clearly. They had condemned themselves far better than I ever could. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the night. The Texas air met me with a dry gust, carrying the scent of dust and asphalt, still thick with the heat of summer even after dark. For the first time all evening, I could breathe without feeling the weight of eyes on my back. The laughter and chatter I'd left behind seemed to belong to another world, one I no longer had to fight my way through. My heart, once pounding under the strain of humiliation, felt lighter, steadier. The ache that had lived there for years loosened its grip. I glanced across the lot and saw it, the military vehicle still parked under the jaundiced glow of the street lamp. Its dark frame cast a long shadow over the pavement, unmoving, silent, but powerful in its presence. It stood as a reminder that the truth was immovable, that no rumor or whispered insult could ever undo it. Behind me, I could sense the party dragging on in strained murmurs, the weight of shame pressing down on those who had tried to make me their entertainment. Whether they changed or remained the same no longer mattered to me. Their acceptance had once felt like a prize I could never win. Now, I understood it was worthless. I walked toward my car, each step firm, each breath deeper than the last. The night air stung my cheeks, but instead of hurting, it cleared something in me. My worth had never been theirs to grant or revoke. It had always been mine. In the quiet, I let my thoughts settle like dust after a storm. Honor isn't the label they pinned on me. Honor is what I lived, what I carried, and what I'll keep, no matter what they choose to believe. I placed my hand on the door handle, pausing for a final look. The glow of the street lamp, the silhouette of the military vehicle, the vast Texas sky stretching endless above. It all felt like a seal closing on a chapter I had carried too long. Then I slid into my car, started the engine, and drove off into the warm night. No applause followed me. No vindictive satisfaction burned in my chest. What I carried instead was quieter, stronger, a freedom untethered from their judgment. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need recognition. I only needed this, the calm certainty that I was enough, and had always been enough.